Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening. We're going to start today, this evening, with the parables on egotism. And we're going to have to use our imaginations. I think Hindu cows speak a different language. They don't go moo moo. There, they have a different language. So Atma, tell us about the cow here.
This is entitled From Hamba to Tuvu. The cow cries, Hamba, which means I. That is why it suffers so much. It's yoked to the plow and made to work in rain and sun. Then it may be killed by the butcher. From its hide, shoes are made, and also drums, which are mercilessly beaten. Still, it does not escape suffering. At last, strings are made out of its entrails, for the bows used in carving cotton. Then it no longer says, Amba, Amba, I, but Tuhu, Tuhu. That. Only then are its troubles over. O Lord, I am the servant. Thou art the master. I am the child. Thou art the mother. Egotism is the cause of all suffering.
Yes, Sri Ramakrishna used to tell this on a couple of occasions to illustrate how we need to shift from thinking about ourselves and wallowing in our ego sense, both good and bad. You know, we go through times where we think very highly of ourselves and other times where we think very poorly of ourselves. Neither of those things are very healthy, but we have to think of ourselves as a servant of the Lord, or as a child of the Lord, or as an instrument of the Lord. The Lord is working through us. And so this is the parable that illustrates that. But I've never heard a cow go humba myself, but maybe in India they do. All right, let's. The second one is also on egotism. Several of these are on egotism. Okay, let's read the second one.
Egotism is ruinous. The disciple who had firm faith in the infinite power of his guru walked over the river by simply uttering his name. Seeing this, the guru thought, well, is there such a power in my mere name? And well, how great and powerful must I be? The next day, the guru also tried to walk over the river, uttering, I. But no sooner did he step into the water than he sank down and was soon drowned. But the poor man did not know how to even swim. Faith can achieve miracles, while vanity or egotism brings about the destruction of man.
And of course, there's another version, a very similar story, where someone has walked across the water taking the name of Rama, and he keeps it written on a little piece of paper tucked in his cloth. And so someone sees this and says, well, can I do this too? And he says, oh, sure. So they give him the little paper with Rama, but he doesn't show him what it is. He just gives him this paper like it's a secret magic paper. And it is, with the name of Rama on it. But he doesn't tell him what it is. So he tucks it in his cloth and tells the man to walk across the water, and for a while he's fine, but he gets curious and wonders, well, what is written on this piece of paper? And then when he looks at, it's just the name of Rama, and he sinks into the river. The same idea. So you have to have faith in the name, and it's not being egotistical, but it's having faith in the name of God. In this case, it was the name of a guru. But anyway, we'll take a musical break now. This particular musical number is from the Ramakrishna oratorio, and it is on the nature of Maya and the fact that if at once we realize that we're not the doer, then we will be free in this life. And so there's a little musical symbolism. The opening themes will start with a three-note pattern. One is too low, the next one is too high, and the third one's in the middle. So you can probably guess what that represents. That represents the three gunas. And you've got tamas and rajas and sattva balancing in the middle. So the theme goes along with that, and then the idea is that Maya we're kind of lost in this mist of Maya, and then we finally get out of it by realizing that we're not the doer. So you'll feel the whole mood of the music shifting when we shift to that, as I shift the mic. was sung by Jamie Schreck. He's unfortunately moved out of the city, but he had this fantastic range. He could sing anything from bass to tenor. So I wrote that song specifically for him. All right, so let's read about Shankaracharya and his foolish disciple. There's a couple of more parables about the ego here.
The great Shankaracharya had a foolish disciple. He used to imitate his master in all matters. Shankara uttered Shivoham, and Shiva, the disciple, also repeated Shivoham. To correct his disciple's folly, Shankara one day, while passing by a smithy, took a pot full of molten iron and swallowed it. He asked that disciple also to do the same. Of course, the disciple could not imitate this act of his master. Thenceforward, he stopped saying Shivoham.
Now, of course, sometimes we repeat these things because we want to imbibe that quality. We know that even though we haven't realized that I am Shiva, we are wanting to realize that I am Shiva or I am divine, however you want to put it. And so it's we don't want to give the impression that it's not good to repeat these things, but to repeat it with an ego, thinking that I'm just as great as my teacher, Shankaracharya, that's the foolishness of it. That reminds me, I used to teach this class with Swami Atmavidyananda, known as Shiva, who passed away a little over a year ago. But he used to tell a funny joke. He was a great storyteller. And this has a slightly different twist to it. But the rabbi was doing his spiritual practice of being humble. And so he went up to the Wailing Wall and started to hit his head against the wall, saying, I am nothing, I am nothing, I am nothing. And the cantor thought he should join him in this spiritual discipline. And so the cantor comes up and says, I am nothing, I am nothing. And so the custodian comes up and decides to join them. I am nothing, I am nothing. And the cantor leans over to the rabbi and says, who does he think he is? So they weren't really doing it with the right attitude. They were doing it to show. They were showing their spirituality. They weren't really thinking of themselves as nothing. So that little old sneaky ego sneaks in here and there. All right, let's look at what Shiva's bull is going to tell us in the next one.
When Shiva's bull bared its teeth, God alone is the doer, and we are all his instruments. Therefore, it is impossible, even for a jnani, to be egotistic. The writer of a hymn to Shiva felt proud of his achievement, but his pride was dashed to pieces when Shiva's bull bared his teeth. He saw that each tooth was a word of the hymn. Do you understand the meaning of this? These words had existed from the beginningless past. The writer had only discovered them.
And that's, you find a similar theme voiced by many people who we often think of as great, but they will say that they just uncovered something that had always existed. It's not like they invented something. They didn't invent a mathematics. They didn't invent a particular kind of machine. They simply uncovered what was already existing. Artists, was it Michelangelo who said that he just, the statue was already in the marble and he just had to cut away the part that wasn't necessary. So it's that kind of attitude that we're not the doer, God's the doer, and he has us do these things to uncover truths and inventions and words and music and art or whatever it is that's already there. And he's just simply leading us as his instrument to allow that particular thing to unfold at this particular time. All right, let's read the last one about the ego here.
How vanity turns a person's head. Those who have read a few books cannot get rid of conceit. Once I had a talk with Krishna about God. This, of course, is Ramakrishna speaking. But once he said, "Oh, I know all about that." I said to him, "Does a man who had visited Delhi brag about that? Does the gentleman go about telling everyone that he's a gentleman? Oh, how vanity turns a person's head." There was a scavenger woman in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar, and her pride, and all for a few ornaments. One day a few men were passing her on the path. She shouted to them, "Hey, get out of the way, you people!" The scavenger woman could talk that way. What can one say about the vanity of others?
Yeah, I'm sure we're all familiar with that aspect of vanity, where people feel that wearing particularly expensive jewelries or watches or whatever it is, or clothes, or having an expensive car somehow makes them more special than the next person. And perhaps if you've raised kids or had younger siblings, you know that as we all tend to go through school, and you reach a certain grade and you learn a lot of stuff, and you pretty soon you think you really know everything. You're happy to show off what you know to everybody that you just learned in the 3rd grade or something. So we do tend to get very proud of our little things, our little trinkets, our little ornaments of learning, or our little ornaments of whatever. And so we have to remind ourselves to be humble. There is always more to be learned and realized, and externals really don't make a person at all. All right, so now we are in a new section called Previous Tendencies. And so these parables are going to point out how we all come into this world with some samskaras, some good, some bad. And of course, the trick is to try to turn the ones that won't go away towards God in some way. So we try to emphasize the best ones and try not to manifest the worst ones, but sometimes things just manifest by themselves and you don't have much to say about it. So you have to try to turn those towards a godly tendency, towards your spiritual path. So let's read our first parable.
Powerful are the inborn tendencies. Let me tell you how powerful inborn tendencies are. The prince had, in the previous birth, been the son of a worshipman. While playing with his chums, in this incarnation as the prince, he said to them, "Stop those games. I shall show you a new one. I shall lie on my belly, and you will beat the clothes on my back, as a worshipman does, making swishing sound."
So we're probably all familiar that we have peculiar likes and dislikes at times, and things that we like to do. And if you're perhaps in a drama club or something like that, you have a particular yearning or tendency to like certain kinds of parts and things. So that's probably some indication of some inborn tendencies, or maybe some previous lifetimes, or perhaps previous yearnings that you had, that you wanted to do something that you never had a chance to do. All right, let's read the next one. This is more on a religious nature specifically.
A Hindu who was forced to embrace Islam. Once there lived a very pious Hindu who always worshipped the Divine Mother and chanted her name. When the Muslims conquered the country, they forced him to embrace Islam. They said to him, "You're now a Muslim. Say Allah. From now on, you must repeat only the name of Allah." With great difficulty, he repeated the word Allah. But every now and then blurted out, "Jagadamba." That the Muslims were about to beat him. And therefore he said, "Oh, I beseech you, please do not kill me. I've been trying my utmost to repeat the name of Allah, but our Jagadamba has filled me up to the throat, and she pushes out your Allah." It's not an easy thing to destroy old tendencies.
Of course, all of us in our spiritual path have to start where we are. We can't start where we're not. And so if a particular path feels uncomfortable, then you know that you need to start somewhere else. No point in starting someplace where somebody else thinks you are or somebody else thinks you ought to be. You have to start where you are. And of course, that's where your personal guru comes into play. He or she can guide you along the path that seems most suited to you. And so you have to, of course, be part of that conversation so that they understand where you are coming from. All right, so nothing is lost in the economy of God.
There's a story about a man who practiced Shabas. He worshipped the Divine Mother in the deep forest. First he saw many terrible visions. Finally a tiger attacked and killed him. Another man, happening to pass by, seeing the approach of the tiger, climbed a tree. Afterwards he got down and found all the arrangements for worship at hand. He performed some purifying ceremonies and seated himself on the corpse. No sooner he'd done a little japa than the Divine Mother appeared before him and said, "My child, I'm very much pleased with you. Accept a boon from me." He bowed low at the lotus feet of the goddess and said, "May I ask you one question, Mother? I'm speechless with amazement at your action. But the other man worked so hard to get the ingredients for your worship. He tried to propitiate you for such a long time. But you did not consent to show him your favor. And I, who don't know anything of worship, have done nothing, who have neither devotion, nor knowledge, nor love, and who hasn't practiced any austerities. I'm receiving so much of your grace." The Divine Mother said with a smile, "My child, you don't remember your previous birth. For many births you tried to propitiate me through austerities. As a result of those austerities, all these things have come to hand, and you've been blessed with my vision. Now ask me your boon." One must admit the existence of tendencies inherited from previous births.
And if you should ever be in that situation, make sure you've thought ahead of time what boon you're going to ask for. Don't ask for something stupid. So, now there was a footnote there that this is a spiritual practice of the Tantras where the spiritual aspirant has an elaborate worship and sits on a corpse to do it. So that was what the Savasthana was referring to. And that's why he was sitting, it refers to sitting on the corpse. It's part of this tantric worship. So again, this just shows that you can't predict when your time might come because you don't know what kinds of things you've done in your previous lives and how much karma you've got to work off. And of course, this also goes for when you run into difficulties and you think, well, okay, I'm just burning off some bad karma here. So sometimes we have to be thankful for having difficult times, because at least we're burning off some of our bad karma. So have to put a positive spin on things sometimes. It's not always easy to remember that, but you have to try to remember that. So again, we just always have to be ready, to ask for the right boon if it comes, and don't be surprised either way. You might be like the first person that just seems to try and then ends up getting eaten by a tiger. Or you might be like the second person that all of a sudden the Divine Mother's grace is showered upon you. All right, the inevitables.
Everyone must reap the result of his past karma. One must admit the influence of tendencies inherited from the past births and the result of Prarabdha karma. And one must remember that pleasure and pain are the characteristics of the embodied state. In Kavi Kankan's Chandi, it is written the Kalaveer was sent to prison, the heavy stone placed on his chest. That Kalu was born as the result of a boon from the Divine Mother of the universe. As pleasure and pain are inevitable when one accepts a body. Again, take the case of Srimanta, who was a great devotee. Through his mother, Kulana, was very much devoted to the Divine Mother. There was no end to his troubles. He was almost beheaded. There's also the instance of the woodcutter, who was a great lover of the Divine Mother, where she appeared before him and showed him much grace and love. But he had to continue his profession of woodcutting and earn his livelihood by that arduous work. Again, while Devaki, Krishna's mother, was in the prison, she had a vision of God himself, endowed with 4 hands, holding mace, discus, conch shell, and lotus. But with all that, she could not get out of prison.
And of course, these avatars and great ones take on karma in order for the divine play to be worked out. If there was no drama, then there would be no teaching. We learn by examples. We're kind of slow-witted beings sometimes, and we have to learn when we are shown examples. So really, when you read the lives of these avatars, you think, wow, being an avatar is not all it's cracked up to be. They have a pretty tough time. They end up being banished into the forest, and their wives are abducted, and they're cheated out of kingdoms, and they're crucified on the cross. I mean, it's not a happy life. So, but they've taken on these things for the sake of the devotees, so that they can understand some spiritual principles. And so he was referring to these things. These are really karmas that are taken on by people. Or in the case of people close to the avatar, they've come in with certain karmic tendencies specifically designed for this particular incarnation of the divine incarnation. So, good. We've got some time. We've got one more in this section. The way, the only way.
Why shouldn't one be able to lead a spiritual life in the world? But it is extremely difficult. Once I passed over the bridge at Baghdad, how many chains it is tied with? Nothing will happen if one chain is broken, but there are so many others to keep it in place. Just so there are many ties on a worldly man. There's no way for him to get rid of them except through the grace of God.
And that really applies to whether you're a monastic or a householder. Those chains don't disappear just because you're living in a monastery or a convent. you're still living in the world. You still have to eat, you still have to cook, you still have to clean, you still have to do all sorts of things. We have to pay taxes, we have to pay insurance. All these fetters don't go away. No matter what situation you're in, the world has a certain amount of chains on you, and really it's always the grace of God that gets us out of these things. And referring to the previous parable where we have the one sadhaka who did all the worship preparations and did so much praying and so forth, and we have to go through these things, but once realization comes, like it did to the second person, it won't feel deserved because it's so overwhelmingly more than anything that could have happened through a series of actions. That's why we say it's the grace of God, because even though we do spiritual practices and we try to prepare ourselves for spiritual realization, when it comes, it's much more than anything that could have been gotten through a series of karmic actions. And so it is by the grace of God. But you're just preparing yourself for that grace. All right, now, there we go. We have another musical parable on faith, which I'll play next time. But let's read a couple of the parables on faith first. The faith of a child.
A boy named Jatiya used to walk to school through the woods. The journey frightened him. One day he told his mother of his fear, and she replied, "Oh, why should you be afraid? Call Madhusudana." "Mother?" asked the boy. "Who is Madhusudana?" Mother said, "Why, he's your elder brother." One day after this, when the boy again felt afraid in the woods, he cried out, "Oh, brother Madhusudana." There's no response, and he began to weep. "Where are you, brother Madhusudana? Come to me, I'm afraid." Then God could no longer stay away. He appeared before the boy and said, "Here I am. Why are you frightened?" And so saying, he took the boy out of the woods, showed him the way to school. When he took leave of the boy, he said, "I will come whenever you call me. Do not be afraid." One must have this faith of a child, this yearning.
I wish I could remember the details, but there's a film called The Miracle of Marcelina that has a similar theme where it was a little orphan child raised in a monastery, and he had complete faith and had this spiritual experience of God, which of course flabbergasted all the monks who had been trying for years. So this is a common theme. It seems like children are more guileless. You see, they're not so calculating, and they're not trying to earn God through a series of steps, but they simply have faith, a very simple childlike faith. We often say you have to be childlike, not childish. You have to be childlike and have this complete faith in God, that God is always there. And we have a similar story coming up next. A boy who actually fed God.
A Brahmin used to worship his family deity with food offerings. One day he had to go away on business. As he was about to leave the house, he said to his son, "Give the offering to the deity today and see that God is fed." The boy offered food in the shrine. The image remained silent on the altar. He would neither eat nor talk. The boy waited a long time. But still, the image did not move. But the boy firmly believed that God would come down from his throne and sit on the floor and partake of his food. And so he prayed to the deity, saying, "Oh Lord, come down and eat the food. It's already very late. I cannot sit here any longer." But the image did not utter a word. And the boy burst into tears and said, "Oh Lord, my father asked me to feed you. Why won't you come down? Why won't you eat from my hands?" And he wept for some time with a longing soul. And at last the deity, smiling, came down from the altar and sat before the meal and ate it. Feeding the deity, the boy came out of the shrine room. His relatives said, "The worship is over. Now bring away the offering." "Well, yes," said the boy, "the worship's over, but God's eaten everything." "How's that?" asked the relatives. The boy replied, "Why, God's eaten the food." They entered the shrine and were speechless with wonder to see that the deity had really eaten every bit of the offering.
He was lucky his relatives believed him. I'd have thought he had eaten it. Sometimes we do some work at USC, and we had a priest that used to talk about the food offering being a dedication, but I would always add that people that have the eyes to see can see a light coming out of the eyes of the deity and enjoying the food through that way. Obviously, they don't physically eat it, but they enjoy it through seeing it. And so by seeing the food, they've imparted their divine energy into the food. So when the food is offered, the deity has literally partaken of its essence and endowed it with its spiritual essence, and that's why it's sanctified food and is considered good to eat. So let's skip the next one because it's the one that we're going to do the musical version of next time. The reason I picked this next one for the musical version is that I already had a parable that had 3 men, and I wanted a parable that had some women parts in it, so I picked this next one about this pot of curd. So let's skip the pot of curd until next time and go on to the simple secret. Again, we're going to look at childlike faith.
God can be realized through childlike faith and godlessness. A certain person, on coming across a sadhu, humbly begged him for instruction. The sadhu's advice was, "Love God with all your heart and soul." The inquirer replied, "Well, I've never seen God, nor do I know anything about him. So how is it possible that I should love him?" The holy man inquired whom the other loved most. And the answer was, "Well, I have nobody to care for. I have a sheep. That's the only creature I love." The sadhu said, "Then tend the creature and love it with all your heart and soul. And always remember that the Lord abides in it." Having given this advice, the sadhu left the place. The inquirer now began to tend his sheep with loving care, fully believing that the Lord abode in the creature. For a long time, the sadhu, during his return journey, sought out the person he had advised, inquired how he was getting on. The latter saluted the sadhu and said, "Master, I'm all right thanks to your kind instructions. Much good has come to me by following the line of thought prescribed by you. Time and again, I see a beautiful figure with 4 hands within my sheep. And I find supreme bliss in that.
So that's a good lesson for all of us, especially anybody in a service type of occupation where you have clients that you're serving in some way, whether you're teaching or in medical, some sort of medical profession, or even in sales. In sales, you're really serving your customer, trying to find the best thing for them. That's the attitude to take if you're in sales, not how can I make the biggest sale, but how can I serve this customer's needs the best. And if they think they need something and in inquiring, you have a feeling that maybe they don't really need as much as they think they need, you can advise them on that too, and they'll be very appreciative of it and recommend you to their friends. So if you can treat all of the people that you serve as though you were serving the divine, then you'll be sure to do the best job possible. Because, of course, you will want to do the best job possible when you're serving the divine. And that doesn't mean just doing it in the shrine. You're serving the divine in every person that you're meeting and serving. And also, in this case, in the animals that you might be meeting and serving, or in the plants that you might be tending in the garden. So in any of these situations, the things that you're tending, see that there's a divinity in those. Even in inanimate objects, Holy Mother used to say, don't just toss that broom off with no thought. This is an object that deserves attention too, and not just disregarded and dishonored, but it served you by helping you clean the house. So treat it nicely and put it nicely in the corner, and don't just toss things around and as though they were useless. So in our hurry, we often don't remember all these things, but it's good to remind ourselves because the more we can remember that the divinity resides in all things, living and even the non-living, the closer we will be to actually realizing that. We have time for one more, and then we'll sign off for today. The basic faith.
A man must have some kind of faith before he undertakes the work. Further, he feels joy when he thinks of it. Only then does he set about performing the work. I suppose a jar of gold coins is hidden underground. First of all, a man must have faith that the jar of gold coins is there. He feels joy at the thought of the jar. Then he begins to dig. As he removes the earth, he hears a metallic sound, and that increases his joy. And next he sees the corner of the jar, and that gives him more joy. Thus his joy is ever on the increase. Standing on the porch of the Kali temple, I've watched the ascetics preparing their smoke of hemp. I've seen their face beaming with joy in anticipation of the smoke.
It reminds me of my teaching days when I used to teach math. And I wanted my students to have a challenge. I didn't want them to think that math was just a rote enterprise where you learn a set of cookbook steps and you churned out answers to rote problems. But I wanted them to be able to experience thinking through problems and discovering new ways of doing things. And of course, in order to do that, you have to instill some faith in them and tell them that they can do this, that I'm not going to ask a question that's impossible, that you've had all the tools you need to solve these problems. And even if you can't see how on earth you're going to solve this problem, take a step with some faith that you're going to, if you take a step, maybe you'll see a next step. If you don't take the first step, you're not going to see the next step. It's like a maze. If you don't go down one corridor, you're not going to see whether it's a dead end or leads to someplace. And so that's having faith in yourself. You have to have faith in yourself when you do your spiritual practices, that you have the ability to realize God. And we don't know if it's going to happen in the first day or the first week or the first year, the first decade, or this lifetime. But probably by the end of the lifetime at least, you will achieve the goal. And so with that faith, you continue that you are, with the faith that you are on the right path and that you have the tool that given to you by the guru that will get you to the goal. All right, so that's a nice place to stop, and we'll see you next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.